Hello, it's me, Dick Pauls, coming to you today with Matthew chapter 14. This one right here is pretty much going to be a read-through. And this chapter right here is more about what Jesus does right here than what he says. There's not a lot of words in red, but there's a lot of things that he does. So I've already prayed and asked God to help me talk to you, and I suggest you do the same anytime you place yourself in the Word. Pray and ask God to help you understand what you're reading, and He will. I'm sure He will. So, chapter 14 of Matthew, verse 1. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the news about Jesus and said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are at work in him. For when Herod had John arrested, he bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip. For John had been saying to him, 'It is not lawful for you to have her.' Although Herod wanted to put him to death, he feared the crowd because they regarded John as a prophet." And I want you to note that John was a prophet, and he foretold the coming of Jesus, just like some of the other prophets said that he would. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod. And this daughter that they're talking about is a small child. She played and danced in front of them, and her innocence and play is why this happened. It's not some weird thing about, his wife's daughters dancing in front of him. That's not what's happening. So much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. See what I mean? He's talking to a small child. I'll give you whatever you want. You see what I mean? Having been prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." Her mother had to tell her to do it. Obviously, if it was left up to her, she wouldn't ask for that. Although he was grieved, the king commanded it to be given because of his oaths and because of his dinner guests. There were probably Romans sitting at the table, and he didn't want to look weak. He sent and had John beheaded in the prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. His disciples came and took away the body and buried it, and they went and reported to Jesus. Now, when Jesus heard about John, he withdrew from there in a boat and to a secluded place by himself. And when the people heard of this, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when he went ashore, he saw a large crowd and felt compassion for them and healed their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This place is desolate, and the hour is already late. So send the crowds away that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said to them, finally Jesus says something, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, "Bring them here to me." Ordering the people to sit down on the grass, he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up toward heaven, he blessed the food, and breaking the loaves, he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. They picked up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 full baskets. There were about 5,000 men who ate besides women and children. Okay, so the disciples knew of this. The people did not. They ate the bread, but they didn't know of the miracle, not at that time. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he sent the crowds away. After he had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And Jesus often did this, to go away to pray. And as we just read, John the Baptist had just been killed, and it had been reported to him. And John the Baptist was actually Jesus' blood cousin, so it was probably very hard for him. Let's see, he had crowds. After he had sent the crowds away, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already a long distance from the land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And what I do want you to hear is what Jesus said right there. He said, "Take courage, do not be afraid." Okay? Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid. But he said, take courage, do not be afraid. So don't walk around in fear of everything all the time. If you're a child of God, you shouldn't have to live in fear all the time. Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. That's a miracle in itself. But seeing the wind, he became frightened and began to sink. And then he looked around when he was walking towards Jesus and believed. He looked around and saw the storm, got scared. It's very human. He began to sink and he cried out, "Lord, save me." He had no reason to cry out. There was no way Jesus was going to allow him to die. Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Why did you doubt enough to sink? And why did you doubt enough to have to call out to me to save you when you know that I would? See what I mean? When they got into the boat, the wind stopped. And those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "You are certainly God's son." When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized him, they sent word to all the surrounding district and brought to him all who were sick. And they implored him that they might just touch the fringe of his cloak, and as many as touched it were cured. And I didn't make a whole lot of references in this one. It's pretty straightforward. But like these miracles, like he fed the 5,000 didn't know about it. The disciples did. And when he walked on water and Peter walked on water, only those on the boat saw that miracle, not the 5,000. You see what I mean? So he was still performing miracles, but he was performing them for those who believed, and he was doing it. Well, anyway, he was performing for those. These miracles came to him, through the Spirit, through God, but they manifested in front of those who believed. I guess that would be the way to say it. They manifested in those who believed in God and in Jesus Christ as being the Son of God. So, anyways, that's all I have for this one. And I'll come back with 15 probably fairly quickly because 14 was so short. Yeah, well, God bless. Thanks for watching.